Hello, I'm David Hunt and welcome to The Art Hunter. My guest today is an award winner, theatre director, writer, choreographer with a Masters in Fine Arts Directing. NIDA, hello NIDA, think Melbourne Theatre Company, Bell Shakespeare, member of TheatreWorks. She writes Collective, which I've done an interview with them and they're a wonderful group of people. And is currently directing, hello, this is big news. I say hello and I look up because somebody thinks I say hello too much. Directing the Australian premiere of the West End hit musical, The Grinning Man. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much, David. Lovely to be here.
Now, let's start from the beginning. How did it all start for you? The interest in the arts.
It all started when my mum took me to a tap class at Brent Street Studios at the age of 3.
Yeah, wow.
And I discovered my love of dancing. So dancing was really my way into theatre.
Yep.
Throughout high school, I did all of the school musicals. I played Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast in year 12.
Wow.
But really, I wasn't encouraged to pursue a career in the arts. I just thought that it was something I loved doing.
Oh, okay.
So I left high school and I knew that I loved writing and talking to people. And so I started off doing journalism actually, and that didn't feel quite right. So I tried again and went to...
Tough, it's tough.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was moving online, and I've always been more of an analog kind of person. So then I tried a teaching degree. I thought I wanted to, inspire the next generation of young people, which I do, but just not in the classroom necessarily. And it was while I was at Sydney Uni studying to be an English and a drama teacher that I was starting to do lots of musical theatre on the side.
Okay.
And someone asked me to choreograph Spring Awakening, and that was my first taste of being on this side of the production. And I loved it. I was having 3 a.m. dreams, visions about how people were moving about the theatre space. And the director of that production said, I think you should try directing if you can think in that way. So then I ripped off the Band-Aid. I had no idea what I was doing when I directed the Sydney premiere of Ned, a musical that actually premiered here in Victoria.
Yep.
And that was the end of 2018. And meanwhile, I was just loving it. And so I applied on a whim to do the Masters of Directing at NIDA. And I got picked as one of those 6 people.
Whoa.
For 2019.
6, they only picked 6 directors.
Yeah,
wow.
It's pretty, a bespoke program really.
Yeah.
They pick a little smattering of people with different theatrical interests.
Yep. How exciting must have that been? Were you
it was
aware of
amazing.
how, famous NIDA is?
Absolutely. I genuinely screamed at my mum when I got off the phone with them. I remember this shot of adrenaline through my body. I honestly couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And how was it? What was the process like while you were there? Tough? I hear it's tough.
Yeah, because they jam-pack so much into 1 year. So I just remember turning up on day 1 and the first conversation that took place amongst us 6 directors or aspiring directors was, and what's your voice as an artist? And I'm sitting there and all these other people in my course are throwing around terms like post-dramatic art. And I was really honest and I said, I don't think of myself as an artist yet. I think that's why I'm here, to figure out who I am as an artist.
Yeah.
And so I did feel like, they obviously saw a glimmer of raw talent in me, but I truly didn't have much of a portfolio of work like a lot of the other directors did in the course.
So they were all,
huge spectrum.
Involved. Okay.
Yeah. Some people who were significantly older than me.
Oh, so not a lot of fresh from school. Per se?
No,
okay.
The Masters is definitely people who have already done a degree and have experience in the field.
Yep.
And so I did feel, at the start of that year, I felt like I had quite a lot of catching up to do in terms of learning about the history of theatre making and learning from the greats. I couldn't have spoken about Bertolt Brecht or Ariane Mnouchkine or Pina Bausch, but throughout, I think I just had this fire in my belly and this hunger because I loved it so much. So it just brought me to life when I was getting a chance to create art. And so I just worked my absolute butt off that year. I spent, every hour that I could be in that building, I was in that building and sucked the life out of it. And by the end of the year, I could articulate who I was as an artist and the kind of work that I wanted to make and why, I guess.
Well, but isn't that important, I think? You know, that journey to discover that is just as important as knowing who you are straight away, which you probably don't, you know, like at that stage. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it is exactly like you said, it's a journey and it's a process, and it was a scary process, you know. It required, I really had to pump myself up every morning to step foot inside that door, because we were put on the spot so much, and we had to constantly pitch ideas and lead rooms and just wrestle with all of this new terminology and process, I guess, that was foreign.
But stepping out of there, once you've finished, like all of a sudden the door closes behind you and you're going, where do I go? What do I do? Well, what was your first move? Because, you know, isn't that the hardest thing? You know, because you don't have a reputation as yet.
Absolutely. So at the end of the year, the year culminates in putting on your grad show.
Yep.
And you have, the provocation is you have 45 minutes to put yourself on stage. And I struggled. I guess I felt the pressure of that. You know, you get one shot to have all the they invite all the industry, you know, Sydney Theatre Company and Belvoir, they all come along and watch the grad shows. And so I kind of felt like I've got this one shot to showcase what I can do. And I spent a long time, many lunch times, you know, in the library looking for scripts that really spoke to me on a deeply personal level. And I guess my background as a dancer means that music is really important to me in my practice, as is movement and creating quite a visually beautiful, poetic scape on stage. And I was writing an essay, I was doing an assignment, you know, studious little Miranda, and I was listening to the soundtrack of the film AMÉLIE, the French film. Yep. And I'd always wanted to choreograph something to that gorgeous Jan Tiersen score. And then my heart skipped a beat and I thought, what if I could actually get the rights to adapt the screenplay into a little 45-minute stage show? Yeah. And because it was a student production, the producer at NIDA managed to get the rights.
Fantastic.
So I created this, there's a photo actually behind you, David, of my grad show. And so it was whimsical, it was a cast of 6. There were actor musicians creating this bohemian, Parisian, you know, environment, cabaret tables. The audience was kind of intimately involved in the world. And fortunately, the resident dramaturg at Sydney Theatre Company at the time loved it.
Brilliant.
So I got a meeting with her in the January after I'd, you know, done my grad show, I guess. And so I felt like, okay, there's hope, there's a glimmer of hope on the horizon. And she just wanted to have a chat about what I was working on next. And at that point in time, I was starting to conceive my next passion project, I guess, which is a musical about the Australian-born author of Mary Poppins. P.L. Travers left Australia exactly 100 years ago, in fact. She set sail, she was born in Queensland, lived here until she was 25, and then set sail for London, and within 10 years had published Mary Poppins. Yeah,
and then that whole story of Disney and yellow.
That's right, that's right. So that was, I just, when I discovered that she was Australian, because her imagination I just think is extraordinary. When you delve into her archives and the way that she talks about writing and characters and inventing worlds. She's got this beautiful quote about the kind of the making of Mary Poppins. You know, people ask her, where did she come from? How did you conceive her? And she says, well, I didn't conceive her. One moment I'm sitting at my typewriter and she isn't there, and then the next moment she is. So she was just this quirky, wonderful woman, and I wanted to, I guess, theatricalize her life via a musical. Wow. So that's still in development, and actually the thing that brought me to Melbourne. But I guess to loop back, that was a long-winded way of saying...
No, it's fine. It was a great story.
Yeah, but I think in the arts, you never quite know when one thing will lead to the next. So it was kind of, AMÉLIE was my discovery, I guess, of my writing voice, because I adapted the screenplay myself. And I also met this wonderful collaborator who was a second-year actor at the time, and we've now written a play together that was on at TheatreWorks last year. And
what was that called?
That was called PEAR-SHAPED.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2 sisters. And uses Alice in Wonderland. So I do have a bit of a thing of adapting, I guess, source material. But
there's so much, why not? You know, like sort of develop it beyond that story from. Well, look at Shakespeare, how they adapt so much. And talking about Shakespeare, did you? Boom, boom, nice little segue. Yeah. Bell Shakespeare?
Yes. So I guess one of the things to come out of having then moved pretty strongly into musical theatre, I've recognised and accepted this within myself. I simply adore musicals.
Yep.
They make me really happy when I go and watch them. You know, a good musical, I just think, they kind of restore my soul, you know, rejuvenate me. And so that's what I like to do as a theatre maker as well. Bring audiences into a space and hopefully send them out back into the real world, a little bolstered, you know, galvanized by the beautiful music. I think beauty on stage is really important when there's a lot of pain and darkness outside the theatre. And so, yes, I guess I started really expressing my interest in making musical theatre in particular. And I heard that Bell Shakespeare was adapting A Midsummer Night's Dream. The writer is Laura Murphy, and she wrote the whole thing herself. It was called The Lovers. And I managed via Laura to hear a glimpse of her kind of music, and I was just like, oh gosh, it's joyful.
Wow.
It's, you know, female and empowered and kind of everything I want to do in theatre. So I applied to assistant direct on that production and did that in 2022 at the Opera House.
Whoa!
Yes!
Opera House?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It was a bit of a, you know, this kind of moment, like walking to work from Circular Quay and just thinking, is this real? Am I living in a dream right now? But that was amazing, you know, witnessing the making of a new Australian musical, because they're hard. It's, you know, it's not a walk in the park.
No.
All of the elements have to come and combine to tell the same story. So new Australian works are, you know, just challenging and notoriously so, but it was, I loved the cast and the team and the story.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that
Thank
one
you.
alone. Then Melbourne Theatre Company, you got involved there?
Yes, that's right.
What was that with?
So that was assistant directing the great Simon Phillips, who has been a bit of an idol of mine for a while, I guess, because he has pioneered Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Muriel's Wedding, the musical, more recently Banana Land. So he similarly has kind of carved a career out of working on new Australian musicals.
Yep.
And so I invited him to my first ever staged reading of the P.L. Travers musical, which is called Paper Stars. And
why Paper Stars?
Paper Stars is taken from the chapter in Mary Poppins where they go and visit Mrs. Corrie, who owns a bakery, and they purchase gingerbread stars, and there are little paper stars underneath the gingerbread. So then when Jane and Michael have eaten the gingerbread, there are these paper stars, and later that night, at the end of the chapter, Mary Poppins sneaks out and pins those paper stars into the sky. And it was actually the composer who had the idea. It was kind of this untitled musical, and then he had this brainwave and thought it was just a beautiful metaphor for kind of encapsulating the tussle between fiction and reality, which is at the heart of the show. P.L. Travers had a really hard childhood, actually, growing up in rural Queensland with an alcoholic father and a mother who had needed, you know, medication for mental health issues. Yeah,
and she moved at 20, did you say she moved?
She was 25.
25? That's young back in that era.
She was young, so she was kind of running away from,
you can understand
her past,
why.
I guess, and her Australian roots.
Anyway, sorry.
Yes.
Back to...
So Simon came and saw the first ever staged reading in Melbourne, so that it was workshopped through Salty Theatre in 2021, and Simon came and saw that show, and the very next day I had an interview with him to assistant direct on his new musical Come Rain or Come Shine at MTC in 2022.
Right, wow. Yeah. Now, I asked you off camera, and it's really good for our viewers to get an understanding of what it's like behind the scenes, and you're very much behind the scenes person directing and doing all the other bits and pieces. Writing, can't wait for this musical to get off the ground. Yeah. But how hard is it, you know, like in between, you know, like you've got to play on and you're concentrating, you're working so hard, and then all of a sudden, you know, like there's nothing, you know, or there might be, you know, down the track a few months, nothing. you know, like, is that soul destroying for you, or do you find that that encourages you to get out there and fight harder?
I think it's really interesting. I was a little burnt out midway through last year because I had just had back-to-back work for a period of 6 months where I quite literally almost didn't have a day off or a weekend.
Whoa.
Because I think it's actually that's the most challenging part of the job.
Yeah.
It's the fact that whilst you're in rehearsals for one show, you're on the phone to a writer of another show, you're
right.
Zooming at lunch with the lighting designer of the next show, you know, and you're applying for grants and you're pitching because, like you said, you're scared of that void. But I think what I learned last year was actually that ideas, if you don't have time to germinate or to have ideas, they don't come. So actually those downtime, the periods of, you know, downtime are actually really important, and that sometimes for an artist, rest is just as much a part of the job as the constant making.
Yeah.
Because you want to get into the rehearsal room and think, I'm fresh and ready and excited, rather than, my goodness, my brain is tired.
Yeah. But what do you do financially though when that break comes and, you know, there's 2 or 3 months, there's nothing?
Yeah.
It's a tough road, isn't it?
It's a tough road, and look, I'm definitely not doing it for the money, I guess. I had a bit of a formative period in my life where my godmother, I was caring for my godmother a couple of days a week. She had pancreatic cancer at the time. And it was this transition period in my life. I was still studying to be a teacher, but where I was finding all the joy was in, you know, the musical theatre stuff I was doing on the side. And so when she died at the age of 49, it made me reassess all my life choices. And I just thought, you've got one shot at this life. And that was when I decided I want to spend more time doing theatre, making theatre. And so then I kind of made that pivotal decision to really pursue what my heart was telling me, even though my financial prospects aren't, you know, amazing. But I'm rewarded in other ways, I guess.
Miranda, you did actually say as well about teaching.
Yes.
But that's how you fill that void as well. You do a little bit of teaching on the side.
Yeah. So if I have
smart. You're very smart. You're like having that to fall back on.
I think I'm lucky. I'm really lucky that I can fall back on teaching, and that sometimes, you know, a rogue theatrical walking into Fitzroy High School on a Wednesday when I'm not in rehearsals, I kind of inject quite a refreshing energy into the school and the classroom. And I guess it keeps me in touch with the real world as well. I hear what kids are talking about. I watch them, you know, eating their apple with a fork. Like, you see really interesting things at school, and
that's hysterical.
That can inform, you know, who knows, that will probably make its way into a play of mine one day.
Yeah, I think that's very funny.
Yes.
Now let's talk about what you're here mostly to talk about today in this complex. We're at the Alex Theatre, and next door, this coming month, you're directing what?
Yeah, it's called The Grinning Man, and it's the biggest thing that I will have done.
Wow.
And that is exciting and terrifying.
Miranda, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Where's it from? What's its background?
Yeah, I can tell you the genesis story. It was a cold night in London in January of 2018, and I was just having a bit of a between uni kind of holiday. And my friend said to me, I think you should try and get a seat to this musical. It's mostly sold out. I won't be able to come with you. You'll have to go alone.
Okay.
But it's called The Grinning Man, and it's based on a Victor Hugo novel, and it's kind of, she said...
who's he? You know, because what else he's done.
So Victor Hugo wrote Les Miserables. And a wonderful, you know, I've had to do quite a lot of research into his life, I guess. He was exiled from France during the late 1800s because he was an anti-authoritarian. And there's this beautiful quote of his that is like, theatre and art is not the realm of the real. And so I guess that kind of is beautifully encaptured in this show, The Grinning Man, based on the French novel The Man Who Laughs.
Right, okay. So tell us, you went to see the
So I
play.
went, yes, and my friend said, you know, it kind of is everything you love on stage. There's direct address, there's a clown, there's beautiful music, and it was really the music that sold me on the show. I just sat there and I was just completely transported from the first note on the piano. It's this dark, magical world of kind of the Victorian freak show era.
Yeah.
And anyway, I left that theatre and I vowed that I would bring it to Australia, and sat like a little pest emailing people about the rights for the next 5 years. And finally they became available and we jumped on them. And so this is the first kind of professional production to be done outside of the UK.
Okay, well, why hasn't it travelled? You know, like with you know, his background, the writer.
Yeah.
You'd think that the Americans would have snapped it up and.
Yeah.
How does this happen?
I'm not sure, and I think that's actually kind of the magic and the mystery of theatre that people just will never understand. It's a bit of a right time at the. Or right place at the right time situation, you know. That wonderful writing team may just not have quite got the right people along to see their show. Also taking into consideration that then the arts industry went into shutdown because of COVID for a couple of years.
Yep.
So really, I think they possibly lost momentum with the show during COVID. So
and how did it happen that you got producers involved here in Australia, here in Melbourne?
Yeah, so I had met Ashley Tickell, who now works at the Alex Theatre.
Has she sat on that couch?
Yep.
She's done a Art Hunter? Yep.
Yes, wonderful woman that she is, and we still need more female producers in this country. But I guess a mission statement of her company is that she supports, you know, female artists. And so she was the first person who really instilled belief in paper stars. And that's what brought me to Melbourne, and I've stayed for 3 years now. And I pitched the idea to her because I guess we both have an interest in musicals that are a little bit left of centre and that are equally, you know, dark and enchanting. And we both I sent Ashley the score and she fell in love with it like I had. And it was just kind of a journey from then, you know, getting VASS Productions on board. And
how come we don't know the music? You know, like how come there hasn't been, you know, like all those big musicals have somebody records one of the tracks as a hit song.
Yes.
Is it that era's gone, maybe? You know,
yeah,
like where
so
you
I think the era of, you know, cast recordings kind of being a main vehicle to get exposure for musical theatre, I think that's a more recent thing. You know, I'd say that's maybe the past 4 years. Now it's really, really normal. If you go and see a musical that has just premiered, you can search on Apple Music, Spotify, and you'll find the soundtrack.
Yep.
Whereas I think in 2018, it was more so, no, you go and experience it live, and if it makes it to Broadway, there'll be a cast recording. So I think that, you know, similarly, the writing team maybe just didn't quite manage to get the material out in the world.
And so what's the basis of the story? You know, like over your shoulder, there's a guy with a red hanky across his mouth.
Yes.
Why?
So that character's name is Grinning Man, and as a young boy, his face was cut by a giant scythe. And the story really follows his journey of remembering who did it to him, finding out who. So deep in the recesses of his mind, he does actually know, but he has been drugged to forget who did it. And so I won't spoil the plot, but it is a character that is on stage from the get-go who did it to him. But also, so I guess it's also, you know, a journey of self-discovery and reconciling with his identity, and with lots of hilarity along the way. You know, it sounds like quite a dark story, but there's a send-up of the royal family and plenty of revelry at Trafalgar Fair.
But it also is exciting. You know, like it looks exciting. It feels exciting. But you've got to sell it now. You know, that's the problem. We don't know it. But there's been other musicals that have come along that, you know, where Wicked is a classic example. We didn't know Wicked at all, and it'd been, you know, huge on Broadway. And then all of a sudden, everyone was talking Wicked.
Yeah, that's right. And it does come down to, I mean, casting is kind of everything. You know, if you have a cast that just enchants those first few audiences that you do get in, then hopefully word of mouth spreads and it'll become a ticket that people, you know, want to jump on while it's in town.
And do you worry about that, or you're just concentrating so much on getting the production right, or do you have to think in the background, oh, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah, do you mean work on an artistic level or more the financial point of view?
You know, like bums on seats.
A lot of my early career work obviously has been in the realm of independent theatre, and when you're working in that space, you absolutely have to think about the bums on seats, because if it's a profit share model, then your artists are only going to get paid if you get all of those people in the door.
Yeah.
I'm really fortunate in this situation, I think, because it is such an enormous show, that I'm truly just focusing on the artistic side of things and making sure that my fellow creatives and I are all speaking the same language and telling the same story. And supporting the cast to tell the story. That's my number one objective. But of course, I then want them to be seen, because theatre only exists with an audience.
Yeah. Now, Miranda, what about set? You know, because it's a free rein for you, I suppose, because you're bringing it here. Set and costumes. How are you handling that? You know, like that would be a nice journey in itself. Or are you following what you saw in London a bit?
No, I mean, I'm the only member of the creative team that actually saw the original production. So whilst that has kind of lived, I guess, in the back of my mind, I think that one of my favourite parts of being a director is actually the collaboration with the designers and the choreographer and the music director, the whole team really, to create the world. Because I think if you create the right theatrical world to cradle the story, then that just does so much of the work for you. Then your actors are free to play and create beautiful images. And sometimes, you know, you do go and see a show and you think, oh, that set's just not quite working in the actor's favour here, or limiting the storytelling. So I started, I guess the process really was starting from scratch. And we've been so fortunate. This UK writing team is amazing. And I actually went to London last year and I met with the original director, Tom Morris, and one of the composers, Mark Teitler, and they were just so encouraging to, you know, really like fly and do our own thing, like spread our wings and put our own stamp on the story. So it just comes down to figuring out as a creative team what is the heart of the story and then what is the world that holds that story. So there's a silent film, it's actually really entertaining. It's called The Man Who Laughs. And that came out in the 1920s.
Wow.
So we had this kind of interesting mishmash of historical periods to play with. But the set designer, Sophie Woodward, we were quite inspired by these shapes and shadows of German expressionism. There's a lot of imagery in the script about being broken and beautiful and jagged, and so it just felt right to have, you know, some German expressionistic shapes as part of the set. So it's multi-leveled and it's got a series of curtains as well, so that we can play with projection, but also transport the audience to the magical world of Trafalgar Fair. And I guess that's the theatre that excites me, when you have kind of a base playing space and then it can just constantly transform and surprise the audience.
Well, wishing you all the very best with it. Can't wait to see it. I've been hearing about it for a long time, and now all of a sudden, you know, I've been following it on social media, and it's ramming up as it's all starting to happen. So, you know, like Miranda, all the very best with it. I'm sure I'll see you around the theatre on a constant daily basis. But, you know, lovely meeting you today, and what a great career you've already had, and it's just going to go through the Mary Poppins thing. I can't wait for that to happen.
It's coming in the next year, I reckon.
Good on you.
Thank you, David.
My pleasure. Yes, I'm David Hunt. You've been watching The Art Hunter, and we'll be back again next week. See ya.